Hello, and welcome to Association Transformation, your award-winning transatlantic conversation. Andrew Chamberlain, co-founder of Elevated, Elisa Pratt, Brewer Pratt Solutions, excited to be back with you and to continue advancing the evolution of nonprofit organizations. You know, Andrew, I consider us the Sherpas through the treacherous terrain of nonprofit management, and I'm excited to tackle a fun and I think both strategic, artful, and scientific topic today.
My God, you've had a lot of time to plan this, haven't you? This introduction, because
I have had a little caffeine today. It'll wear off in a second.
You're absolutely bouncing. Sherpas of the association management world.
Well, you know, given our guest and my English degree, I tried to lay it on a little thick today for the introduction. I want him to know how well read and well spoken we are, the strength of our vocabulary. You know, I tried. Okay.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome. I'm just moving on. I'm delighted to welcome Martin Buick, who is the senior content strategist at CPL in beautiful Cambridge in the UK. Hi, Martin. Ooh. How are you doing today?
Hello. Very nice to be here on a sunny afternoon out there.
I know it's a while since I've been to Cambridge. Is it looking beautiful? All on the backs?
Well, in very modern style, I'm not actually in Cambridge right now. I'm in Essex, where I generally do my working from home from. But Essex is pretty sunny, big skies all the way out along the estuary.
Excellent. Fantastic. So, Lise, we've invited Martin along today. We are talking about creativity. We are talking, and we're not talking about my books. We're talking as in my financial books, which, yeah.
All right. Well, yeah.
Laughing, Martin. Thanks for that.
That's another podcast.
Yeah. That's a different podcast. Yeah. So go on, Lisa. Go on.
No. I'm really, obviously, I'm excited about Martin being here and his area of expertise, his superpower as a journalist, as a writer, as a creative artist. And I think we failed to really appreciate how much creativity can play a role and be leveraged by nonprofits, by associations. And I'm excited, you know, Martin, tell us a little bit about, you know, what you do with organizations and how you help bring them to that creative level.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, I've got an editorial and a journalistic background, and I've written for all kinds of different magazines, newsstand magazines, and for specialist organizations, a lot of charities. And for the last few years with CPL, I've been helping them focus on their professional membership bodies, of which they work with quite a few across a total of 20-something clients. Some of it goes into other areas of corporate and commercial stuff. And they've got some equine clients as well, being based in Cambridge, which is very near Newmarket, which is the home of racing. So they split their work and across a number of different things, and where I come into it specifically, I suppose, is working on the membership side mostly. And one of the things we do at CPL is we want to listen to them in any early stage of a relationship with them to work out what they think their needs are and what their membership's needs are, and work out how we can help them in their careers, help them obviously retain membership and reduce that churn of membership, and give through the content that we will help them create the kinds of solutions they might need for their careers and to develop in their practice. So I often work with people at an early point in that relationship, doing some of that listening, doing some of that thinking, and then hope to transfer that across to the creative teams at CPL for the art workers, designers, the journalists, the editors, sub-editors, the whole of that creative lot. And as well working with the commercial sides of things with advertising to ensure that we can develop a package for membership bodies that is really going to work for them and their membership, because, you know, that's the bottom line.
This isn't just marketing, is it? This isn't just marketing we're talking about here, and I don't want to be derogatory to marketing, but this is bigger than that, isn't it? This is something much more sophisticated.
I mean, the modern way we would put this is to call it content marketing.
Right.
About 20 years ago, we would have called it contract publishing. because publishing and at that point print publishing, and CPL has a really solid journalistic background. It was actually founded more than 25 years ago by a couple of guys who'd been working at the Observer. And at that point, it would have been called publishing. But of course, the world over the last 20 years has really changed. And so sometimes it's branding and design work we'll be looking at. Sometimes it's still very much journalistic work that we're looking at. Sometimes it's podcasts. Sometimes it is in developing websites. Sometimes it's running specific campaigns for specific results over a short period of time. And you put all that together, I suppose people would be, in our sector, would be happy to call it content marketing. But actually, I suppose it's trying to creatively interpret the needs of professional membership organizations, because there's no point creating anything at all or setting out that, we'll spend this much doing a marketing campaign to amplify, to leverage, to do all of that stuff with a certain message, if it doesn't actually chime and have synergy with the business goals of the organization. So we have to really try and ally with that from the start. You might say it's marketing. I actually don't mind saying it's marketing. I work with, obviously, when you're working with creative people, there'll be some people that say, no, I'm a designer, I'm an art worker, I'm an artist. We need some illustration done for a cover of a magazine. We need a really interesting web build being done. So everyone's got their specialisms. Journalists like to think that they're journalists, and I also, as I often say, not everyone's Hemingway, and you don't have to be. It's okay, but at the bottom line, I suppose it's trying to set that organization free to some degree to reach their membership in the way that they might like. I'll give you a literary reference. You mentioned literature at the start, Elisa, so I'll bring one in that is from a huge and sprawling American novel from the late 1990s by David Foster Wallace called Infinite Jest. You're thinking, where on earth is he going with this?
Hold on, I'm writing this book down. I have a new read.
It'll take you a while. It's only taken me 10 years or something. But he says at one point in there, what looks like the cage's exit is actually the bars of the cage. Okay.
Ooh.
And I think that is, with creativity as a whole, the problem that we're trying to solve, because an organization will know something needs to be done. It wants to shake things up. It wants to better reach out to its members. It wants to get them to engage with them, to do something, to give them more membership fees, to turn up to some conferences to further their careers, for them to be able to win more clients, etc.
Yeah.
And often where an agency will come in is to help through their own knowledge of creativity to help that organization do that. But really the trick is to make sure that we're not adding another layer of complexity to a situation, so that what should be the freedom becomes, the thing that's actually trapping you. So creativity should be the key to let you out of somewhere, rather than the key that locks you in.
Yeah, no, that's you mentioned such a wide spectrum, from website to newsletter to membership solicitation. There's such a breadth of content opportunities and maybe trappings. And I wonder, doesn't it all come down to knowing your audience, to knowing who your member is? You've talked about needs and member needs and organizational needs, but where do you start? I mean, you listen, you ask questions. Is not the first question, who is your member and what segments, maybe how many segments can we create within that membership?
Yeah, and there is that layer of doing that. And I think that it is one of the questions we'll first ask. Any call I'm doing with a new client, we'll first say, okay, well, who is the audience? If we don't know the audience, we shouldn't be starting to create anything. And actually, if you've just been falling in a pattern of pumping out content to people because you've had a 3-year contract with someone to put a quarterly magazine out, or you do 3 stories on the website a week, there's not much point doing that if you don't know the reason for for why you're actually doing it. So that's one of the first things we'd always want to actually ascertain. And I think it's knowing the audience, but then below that, there's which bit of that audience do you want to do something? Because you can't necessarily reach all the audience at the same time in the same way. There's those little things called budgets as well, which mean that you need to be aware of how you're going to get more bang for your buck in a slightly targeted way. But I think when it comes to knowing your audience and in order to be able to connect with them, there's immediate needs of an audience, which might be, I need to learn something, I need to find something out, I need to ask a question, I need a problem solved, I want to further my career, I want to get promoted, I want a new job. There's all of that kind of stuff that might be the immediate needs. And then there's the deeper considerations of any social group. And that's to do with connection and belonging. It's one of CPL's tags that they'll write all the time is that we help people belong. And I think that's, if you think of a river where at the top of the river, there's, it's fast moving water and all the ripples and everything. But then deeper down the bottom of the river, that's the slower moving water. And that sense of belonging and that sense of connection that you're hoping to create is what may ultimately drive loyalty through what you're creating. And what you're creating as an organizational brand, and as organizational possibilities for connecting with the audience, and then the actual creative itself, whether that's the website or the podcast or whatever it might be.
We've had some guests come on to help describe their marketing goals, their branding initiatives, and I wonder, how often should an organization do the type of both market reflection and member analysis that you're talking about? Is this something they should save for a strategic plan, for a new website, for a rebrand? Or is this something that they can almost weave into their content culture?
It's a really difficult question, actually. And it probably should be, because I don't think there's any one rule that's going to work all the time. We at CPL, we before all the pandemic started, we published a report called the Content Connection, and in which we, alongside Ashridge Communications, surveyed 37, I think it was, membership bodies about what they thought their members were wanting. What, did they want to pay for the content? Did they want to, how regularly did they want to see content? What was the purpose of the content that they wanted to see? And how did they think that was going to change over the next few years? And while all of them had specific, targeted and tactical considerations that they were making at that point in time, the underlying sense was that although they might, some of them wanted to grow, some of them felt that they needed to keep the membership where it was, but they all kind of felt that it wasn't drastically going to change very quickly. Now, of course, one thing then did change very quickly, which was everyone got themselves out of the office and started working from home because of the pandemic. But continuing to talk throughout that period in time, I still have the sense that the major considerations that professional bodies are needing to take about their membership are still these slower moving currents, because they're, those deeper questions are involve those deeper considerations. People haven't stopped wanting to have careers, even if they've swapped jobs. People still want to feel like they might have a promotion and get on with, and do better work for their organization, even though they might have switched to working from home or hybrid working. And we saw a lot of clients shift their emphasis in terms of the way that they were trying to connect and communicate with their membership bodies during that period. So frequency was one thing that they would change, and a lot of people stopped printing magazines because they actually, the members weren't in the offices to collect them.
Right.
But ultimately, I don't think anyone said, we're going to stop printing full stop, because there's still a value to it, for example. So I think that the deeper level of it is, it doesn't move that quickly, actually, because it's about human nature, ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you're right. I know in the strategic planning work that I do, there is effort to define success. And
Mm-hmm. What
really strikes me about what you said is that there can be considerations and measures of success at two different levels. That understanding and identifying members' needs that are immediate. I want to download something, I want to register for something, I want to scratch that immediate itch and feel value, can be different than how we assess engagement and belonging at a deeper level. And really, you have to consider measures of success at those two different levels to really know what you're trying to achieve and how to measure your impact in those places. How do you guys just help organizations measure the success and the impact of what they then roll out, of that new content, of the new messaging or the new website? Do you have good metrics? I mean, people always struggle with metrics. Mm-hmm. How do you measure?
We would probably match that answer, which is that different organizations have more time to do it, and some of them have less time to do it. As an agency, we always want more metrics, because it will help us understand what might be possible. And of course, metrics is one thing, and then there's that insight you draw from it as well, which is that human factor coming back into them as well. So being able to have time to think about them and work with them is really, really important. It's really useful to us when an organization will invest in producing some of that, whether it's just analytics from the website, or it's a member survey, or it's focus groups. And I'll give you an example that just over 3 years ago, when we started working with the Chartered Institute of Waste Management, and the first thing that we did with them was a lot of we wanted to relaunch to actually launch a content brand for them. So really reinvigorate what they were offering and the way that they were offering what they were in print and digitally for their membership. And when we first got in to speak with them, they'd already done a lot of like a member survey, and the results were in and we could look at them. But from that point in, we could start to get a picture of who was actually working in this sector, and it's really broad. And the people that were consuming that content were, everyone from, director level at local authorities, going down to people working literally, street cleansing, and picking up the recycling and trying to get ahead in the career from that point in time.
So they already knew who they already knew these segments. They knew who was engaging with their content.
Yeah. So then, because that's really useful, because then we can come in and say, well, okay, can we reach everyone? Can we reach everyone all the time? Can we reach some of the people some of the time? And that gives us a platform to be able to start thinking, and to actually bring that word back in, but to start thinking creatively about what we can actually do with those figures. Yeah. And I think that's when a creative agency, as CPL is, starts to be able to work best. And it's at that point that it becomes exciting for a professional body as well. Because at that point, there's an element of playfulness about it again, and it's not just saying, okay, well, we need 3 blogs a week, or, that quarterly magazine is a bucket that needs to be filled because there's guys at the print place waiting for it, and then the paper orders are in. It actually becomes a point at which you can say, how are we articulating ourselves? What can we do to reinvigorate all of this? And it can be a real boost. The other thing I would say about metrics at that point is that although they're absolutely, crucial and useful, there's always a slight danger that, like with any kind of survey response or people writing in the letters to an editor of a magazine, that the same people respond, the same issues arise, and some of there might be hidden issues or other agendas that don't make it through that metric. Some people don't go to a website because, they think it's useless, but you won't know why, because you're not engaging with them if you're asking them via a website that, what's wrong with the website. So you've got to be careful about those, I'm not going to say it, but those unknowns.
Yeah. The way you describe it and the creativity sounds expensive. I'm going to just say it. Andrew knows how cheap I am. And I've come from a background of small staff associations. So maybe it's just the accent. Maybe it's the way you speak about it. This all just sounds very expensive. So
just because we're British, we sound.
It just raises it to a higher level, maybe.
Yeah.
Well, let me give you an example of how it isn't expensive, and there's some things that creativity isn't. Okay, because it might dispel some of those kinds of myths that, anything that sounds good sounds like it's going to cost a lot, and I completely agree. First, the creativity, creation means novelty, it means new things, and actually it doesn't always mean brand spanking new things all the time. It can be tweaking something that's already in existence. The second thing is that perhaps that creativity is about art. And really, it doesn't have to be kind of, blowing all previous creativity out the water and doing something radical. No one needs to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling for the next, for the next quarter, just to reach out and make some messages reach the core membership. Sometimes something that's pretty well crafted will do, and that's absolutely fine. I like to think of art as being craft plus a little bit of inspiration, perhaps. So maybe that's one way of making it sound slightly cheaper. It doesn't need to always break the rules, and it's not also completely an unquantifiable and therefore sort of invaluable and therefore expensive thing that you need to do. It's really just it might involve bits of all of those things, but really it's got to come down to that organization at that point in time and some of the specific needs that need to be met at that point. I actually think that although historically working with non-profits and working with professional membership bodies, etc., we would have gone in and maybe got a 3-year contract to produce X amount of magazines over the course of that period of time. It's loosened up a little bit over the last few years, and it's allowed itself to become a little bit campaign-led. So some clients we will work with will be happy to say, for the next 6 months, we really need to target this theme in order to engage our members on it. And that means it's one way of keeping costs down. But also, I think it's an attitude and a way of working that you can bring into longer standing contracts, which means you're not busting out and trying to do something that suddenly needs a huge budget. But it's a way of reinvigorating the process with the ways of working that you already have.
Well, and this process sounds, it can be applied in so many ways, and there seems to be so many entry points for organizations that want to infuse creativity or engage their audiences. I love that you talk about repurposing content and that this doesn't have to all be about creation, but in some ways packaging and positioning and even just language. But with that small association in mind, what is that number one question? I mean, if they're thinking about how to better address the needs of their members, how to better create belonging and use creativity throughout their content, what's the most important question? What's that first question that they should be asking their members? I mean, where where do you start when you're trying to take that temperature, take the temperature of your audience?
I think it's, what do you need?
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's an often overlooked point, because people often think about what they want to say, which is understandable. But I think just asking people what they need is a really good point, and hearing that from as many people as possible. And I think also, in a related point, that it's remembering that members of organizations are real people. They're individuals, their needs cross over, which is why they've all come to the same place. But they also look outwards into the world. And I think that sometimes conversations become quite inward looking, or there is a danger that conversations become inward looking, in that organizations, they kind of know what they need to do to survive. So they want to engage a membership, body around that. I think that whenever you start, if you're going to start to work with somebody like CVL, it's always good to sort of take that moment to say, what do people really want right now? And sometimes it's simpler, and sometimes it's just a small thing that people really need. And that's why it doesn't always have to be the biggest budget campaign, or just putting more content out to people more of the time isn't always really the answer. Right. It can be taking your magazine and working out some different sections.
No, I think it's so important that you recognize that it's quality, not quantity. And I think it's also important to remember, if you've done this type of research and undertaken these type of campaigns, even just a few years ago, how different your members' needs may be just 24 months, 36 months later. Martin, I think you and I could chat about this forever. And I'm so glad we had you. Hopefully this is the first of many visits. I think creativity and content strategy is something people need to continue to discuss. Obviously Andrew is crazy about it. This is like, he's super excited about, he's speechless. He's so excited about it.
I'm writing notes. I'm writing tons of notes.
Oh, here. Good. Okay. All right. Good.
Someone else's reports, I'm writing down notes. So
and speaking of reports, we'll go ahead and Martin, you mentioned Content Connection, the report you guys released pre-COVID. We'll go ahead and link that in the show notes, as well as a link to your information and CPL. But we so thank you for joining us today. I think a topic that will never grow old, and we look forward to having you back.
Well, thank
Martin,
you for having
Andrew,
me.
Thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to everyone for joining us. If you have a topic or would like to join us as a guest on Association Transformation, please reach out. You can also make us your favorite on any podcast platform. We are found wherever you get your favorite podcasts. And we encourage you to join us next time. And until then, put your members and your mission first.